I'm Alison Mason.
I'm Stanley Bradley, and we're friends turned family, getting together to tell stories, laugh, observe, and think.
This is the Family Meeting. This is part 2 of a longer conversation we had with Natasha about memory. If you missed it, go back and listen to it before listening to this episode. So this question, I feel like, really goes into what we were just talking about. So I'd say, if they are different, what are your important memories? Because I feel like what you've been sharing, the things that stay with you, are important things to remember, to like let yourself understand clearly that you can do the things that people say you couldn't. But again, if they are different, what are your important memories?
So those memories are, I feel like in my mind, I don't rank them as important because, like, even though they inform the way I operate, I just wish they didn't happen and this wasn't true, but they're more like reminders. Maybe like important reminders. I don't know, maybe not important. I'm still thinking about what that term is, but it's more of a reminder than like an important memory for me for some reason. But related to what I was sharing earlier, that when these were going on, I had support systems. Those are the important memories to me. So when people show me who they are and then where I fit into their lives, that's really important to me. And as I mentioned earlier with my neurological Lyme and all of those things, I forget a lot of things. And part of that is that I sometimes feel like I forget who I am, because so much of the way I understand people or understand myself is based on like experiences and examples of demonstration of character, or, you know, so on and so forth. And when I forget about experiences that I've had where I feel like I demonstrated my character to myself, and I forget those, I forget who I am. And so I rely so heavily on kind of like a collective memory. My family remind me of who I am often, because I really do forget I think and so a big example of that is like a couple years ago when I had a different illness, but I needed funds for a surgery that I needed to, that was bordering on like a life-saving situation. I really needed the surgery. It was very expensive. I had to fly out to Colorado to a specialty clinic for it. And I had been dealing with this illness for quite a few years and tried to walk alone in it. Like, even though I mentioned I had this experience when I was 2, and I remember all these things, when it comes to practice of like including people into my struggles, that's really difficult for me. So I was trying to walk this pretty alone. I was keeping people slightly abreast, but not the nitty gritty. And then essentially I just got so ill that I started having to tell people really what was going on. And so I needed funds. And one of my close friends, one of my family members, she created a GoFundMe for me. And she did it when she ended up coming with me to my first round of treatment in Colorado. And I was like hopped up on anesthetics, and I had like all these procedures. And she's like, again, like, this is why my family, they know me a little bit too well sometimes. She knew when to ask. She waits till I was like incoherent and in pain and just like on the sofa drinking chicken soup. And she was like, you know, I think that we could help you. We can create this GoFundMe. I was like, yeah, whatever. And then when I had a procedure, when I came out of the procedure, she had finished the GoFundMe and posted it, because she's like, I knew once you came back to coherency, you would say no. And so it's too late. It's already posted. I said to like all these people, it was done. And I was like, oh my gosh. But at the same time, it really made me start having to share what was going on with people. And I knew who people were, I guess, but I was afraid that if I needed more help, or if I, also now have all these disabilities or these things that would change how people interacted with me. And so during this period of time, prior to the GoFundMe, during all these procedures, my surgeries, the time of recovery up until now, a lot of people in my family have just solidified for me who they are and how they'll show up for me. And so those memories are really, really crucial to me. And I hold on to them very closely, both for great things and for not so great things. And people show me who they are. It's really difficult for me to forget, which, when I was listening to the episode last week, and you all are talking about like interacting with differences. I'm doing a terrible job of reiterating what that conversation was, but it was like recalibrating relationships. And I was like, oh, because I'm quick to be like, oh, you just showed me who you were. I can't trust you. So now you have to go forever. Like forever. But it's because like Well, I should say I should work on that. But I think at this moment, it's because I rely so heavily on my community to remember who I am and remind me of who I am, that I'm like, if I have someone around me who's not trustworthy and they're telling me things that aren't accurate, I'm going to believe them. Like, I'm going to be like, that must be who I am. And there must have been an experience that showed them this side of me that I don't remember. And then it throws me off. And so those memories of what people really demonstrate to me, like where I fit into their lives, are so important to me.
I mean, that's true, right?
Yeah.
Because when you're depending on other people, you need for them to be trustworthy.
Yeah.
And you can't always recalibrate that.
Yeah. And I mean, I would say, like, I think that, you know, personally, I've never heard you say that exactly like that before. And two things stuck out to me. It's like what you said, when people show you where you fit into their life. And I think, you know, we talked about this in the very first episode about family and about cadence and about how, you know, people may not fit into your life exactly the way that you want them to, but like, you know, there's like a middle ground that you have to come to with people. But there's, like you said, like this idea that, like, you know, there's some work that has to be done there on both sides to make space for each other. And when people consistently show you a thing, you're like, okay, like, you know, if we're going to do the halfway work to get to the middle, then that's one thing. But it's like, if you're consistently having to go past halfway, if you're consistently like having to like push into people's lives, that is a very, very telling thing. Yeah. And it's like a good quick litmus test for how to determine who to keep in your family and who not. So that really stuck with me. And then again, personally, like I am grateful that, you know, like she said at the beginning, Natasha is my friendtee. Sometimes more friend than, like, sometimes just more friend than tea, or our mentor mentee relationship kind of flexes with our friendship. But like, I would say, like, I am grateful that you let me speak into your life in ways that you do. So I think, you know, I'm almost exactly 10 years older than you. Again, to your point of like hanging out with people who are older than you. And we've seen so many times how our lives are like parallel. Like, there's so many lessons that I've gone through that, like, as you explain something, I'm like, I have the exact thing to say to that. Oh, wow. Right. And I'm like, I know exactly. But very likely I'm sitting there, I'm like, man, I almost exactly think I know exactly what she's feeling right now. I know what I would want someone to have told me when I was sitting there in that spot 10 years ago. And so, you know, I don't take for granted that you let me speak into your life, that you let me pass those lessons along to you, and that you take them and consider them. Not that you are like, I will do exactly what Alison tells me, I'm a robot or anything like that, but that you literally are just like, yeah, you know, like there are times when you text me just to tell me something as like a friend. And then I come back with some old like mentor, like, here's what you need to do. You're thinking about that the wrong way, blah, 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 blah. Here's a life lesson for the day. And then I'll be like, I'm so sorry. That is not what you wrote to me for. But I always you receive that so well. And so I just like, I mean, I've always say everybody should find themselves in Natasha, like go out and like be to somebody what you needed at a certain point. But then also I will say, like, you give me so much too. So sometimes I feel like it really is like a true back and forth. So I think just emotional for no reason. So sorry.
No, but I think I mean, it makes sense, right? Because you're remembering as she's going through, you're remembering going through, right? Right. Memory, right? And what's the point of memory if not, again, to use it in service of others? Mm-hmm. So like, it makes perfect sense that would come now. And also I'm thinking about your whole mentee, friendtee kind of thing, which is the perfect word, because I think that when you truly develop that mentor mentee relationship, it also becomes just a deeper friendship. Mm-hmm. Because ultimately what it is it's just a friendship, probably with a different amount of knowledge, you know, at its core, but ultimately it's a friendship. It's like, yeah. I mean, I really see it, like, especially, like I said, because we're almost exactly 10 years apart. And I just feel like I'm just further down the road. Like, I'm like, you know, we're like walking a very similar road, and we've come to a lot of similar junctures.
and I'm like, oh no, like go left. I'm like, come left. Like I understand why right looks tempting. Go left. I promise. It's the way to go. So,
well, I was just gonna say, if I could say without getting emotional, because for some reason that just triggered all the little tear ducts. Anyway, but I recall, so one of the memories that I have with Alison in this regard of like people telling me where I fit into their lives. So I had gone to your house for something. I don't know. I think I just went to say hi. And you'd ask me something like how I was doing, and I answered how I would normally answer. And then you gave me like a very loving scolding where you were like, you're not telling me anything. Like you are allegedly going through things and you're not telling me. So how are we supposed to be like of help to you? This is before the GoFundMe and before like I was forced in the best way ever, because it became so like public, but before I was really forced to be vulnerable with a lot of people about this. And I remember being like, oh my gosh, someone can see through it, because I've always been good at saying a lot and saying nothing. That's one of my talents. And so people normally don't realize that I'm not really saying anything that's that deep. Boy, Alison cut me sharp. I was like actually on the way out, I think. And Lance turned and was like, Alison, and she was like, no, and you were like, no, like she's not saying anything to me, and I'm gonna tell her. Like, and you're like, if that's what you say something like, if that's what you want to do, then like, okay, but like that's not the relationship I thought that, something. And I was like, oh, I just sat back. I was like walking out. I think Lance goodbye. And I just turned around and sat right back down in the chair, and I was like, hey, I'm sick. But I remember that very clearly, because in some ways, like I wanted people to be there for me, but I was too afraid to tell them what I was really going on, and potentially what I needed. And in the ways that Alison has been vulnerable in sharing about, particularly in a lot of those that she said, like literally I feel like I'm like walking right behind her. Like there's like sand and she's taking the footsteps. I'm just stepping in each of the footprints. I love it. But the vulnerability that Alison has shared with me about the things that she's been through, or like, oh, I remember when I went through that, and here's the full story, like unfiltered, of what I went through, how I felt, what happened, the decisions I made, what I learned from it. And then here's my suggestions for you. Like that has helped me so much in learning how to be vulnerable with people and really share what's going on, and not just saying a lot and saying nothing all at the same time. And like, because it's been such a positive experience with her, of me learning to be more vulnerable after that conversation, and through seeing her do it, I've been more comfortable doing that with my other friends, even people I've known much longer than I've known Alison. Like I've been like, let me see if I share this thing that's deeper and a little bit darker, what they'll say. And I'm like, oh, Alison was right. If I just tell people, then they like, this is the nature of the relationship that they thought we had, and I just wasn't living up to the agreement. So I'm really grateful for that.
Well, I'll say I learned that skill of weeding through words. I dated a guy who used to say a lot of words, and I would be like, and I bought it for a while, and then I was like, did he say anything? And I was like, he just said a bunch of words. I don't know what any of that means. So I learned how to both do that and dig through that so I'm also good at saying all sorts of things that just fill up sound, and then people who aren't paying attention don't notice.
But you also have an intuitiveness about when people are not being honest with you, that I've known since I've known you, right? Like that's like one of the things that's just intuitive about you anyway. So yeah, I just thought I'd throw that in there.
Yeah, I have to use it on you sometimes too.
Yeah.
You're hiding from people.
That's why I'm smiling, because that's why I'm smiling. If you're on Spotify, I was smiling through that whole thing because I was like, yeah, she's done that to me too, Natasha. That's why we're bonding. I think we probably all, like the whole family probably has that experience where she's been like, let me take out this knife real quick. Make sure you're there.
I'm like, don't try to fast talk me. Don't try to fast talk me. If the answer is, Alison, I don't feel like telling you, then start with that. Be like, Alison, I don't feel like telling you what's going on with me. Just say that, and then I'll leave you alone. But if you're like, oh yeah, look, it's the sky, I'll be like, what are you hiding? Why are you hiding things from me? Don't do that. Okay. So let's go on to some of the new questions for all of us. And this conversation has gotten all good and juicy, but it's long. So let's try to be brief.
I'll be brief.
And this is a good one. And I will give credit. Stan wrote this question. This is such a good question. Is there one memory or story that informs how you live or operate now? Stan, why don't you start?
I'll start because I think about, I don't know if it, well, I guess it does because it probably influenced my career trajectory in a way that I didn't think it would. But I remember being like, so in high school, I took French and I loved French. And so like as a senior in French 4, we got to go tutor these little elementary school kids. And by tutor, we taught them like the French word for school and stuff like that. Like it was just this fun little thing. But I remember the teacher whose classroom we were in, because we did it like once every week for a semester. And I remember the teacher telling me, like, you should be a teacher. You'll be good at being a teacher. And I immediately dismissed it, like out of hand. Like no way. Like teachers don't make money. Like everybody's like at this, you know, like really. And at this point, like people are telling me, you know, you're good at math, you're good at science. I was good at school in particular. And I kind of had the opposite experience from you, Natasha. Like people encouraged me sometimes to do things that I feel like probably weren't my gift, but because I was good at that, like I got the opposite. I got the encouragement. I was the Black kid where they were always like, here, you should do this, Black kid. Here, oh, we need a Black kid. There's Stan, he's gonna do it. And which was fine because it gave me a lot of opportunities. So like I said, that was senior year of high school. I majored in something not education at all. Went to grad school in something that was not education. What did I end up doing? Teach for America. And as soon as I like got my placement, I thought about this lady and I was like, she was right. Like in the story is she was right. And sometimes like, for me, that memory means sometimes you have to be open to those words from people who are not necessarily close to you, but you always have to be open and listening and receptive to a word that you may not want to hear. And you may dodge it, but if it's for you, it's gonna come back to you.
Yes. And I will go next just because literally, and we didn't even plan this, mine is the same lesson. It is hearing things from people who you're not, you know, who are not part of your family necessarily, right? So I worked at Institute. I worked at many, many, many institutes, if you know anything about me, often conscripting people to come back to Florida to work at institutes. But at the 2009 Atlanta Institute, I worked for Lanisha, who is like just a boss. If you in the Teach for America world, you know Lanisha, she's a boss. Mm-hmm. She was my manager a couple of years. And so this was back before I would have ever said that I was like good at communication. And I think I have always been fine with words or writing or whatever, but now I feel like I'm good at communication. And when I was prepping at this, I was like, I think this is why. So one thing that she said, like whenever something would happen and I would be emotional about the thing, right? Somebody would not give me the information in time. I would be scrambling. So I would be angry because I'm trying to like maintain a certain bar of excellence. Somebody else's slip up has now created a panic for me or whatever. And so I would be angry. I'd be like, I let my face get away from me sometimes. I'm glaring at people or, using rude body language. And whenever that would happen, like Lanisha might give me feedback about that. I would like go to the person and be like, hi, I just wanted to like apologize for that, blah, 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 right? Which we can say whether or not I should have done that. But the feedback was always like, stuff happens, you get emotional. You like are sometimes rude to people because of those emotions. And then you apologize really well and clean things up really well. But what Lanisha said to me was, she was like, you're really good at apologies. She's like, do less things you have to apologize for.
Oh.
And I was like, shit. I was like, and then she explained and she's like, so here's the thing. She's like, something happens. You have an instinctual reaction, like somebody upsets you, somebody does whatever. She's like, eventually you get to a thoughtful response. She's like, what I want you to work on doing is shortening the space between your instinctual response and your thoughtful response. But those two pieces of feedback, do less things you have to apologize for, and shorten the time between your instinctual response and your thoughtful response. I like watched myself over the years shorten that time. Like every summer, I felt like I was like that window is smaller and smaller until now. I really feel like outwardly, you don't ever see the instinctual response. Lance will see the instinctual response because I might come home and be like, let me tell you. And I start grabbing air like all Black women in the world. But man, that one piece, those two pieces of advice she gave me, I think they were in the same conversation. It was like, she punched me in the chest. She was like, your apologies are cute. Use them less. And I was like, oh. And so I feel like my ability to be faced with something hard and still give a measured, thoughtful response in that moment is, I think, hinges almost directly on that conversation.
Ooh.
Wow.
That was some.
But you know Lanisha.
Yes.
I think out there know Lanisha.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're listening and you know Lanisha, you know that was not out of character in any way.
No, it was not.
But yeah, do less things you have to apologize for. I was like, because I always thought a nice apology did the trick. I was like, I can just be myself and then just apologize later. People, it's vulnerable people. And I'm like, no, she's like, just do less things you have to apologize for. I was like, okay. So what about you, Natasha?
Well, on brand for this conversation, mine's also tied to Teach for America. Like a promo video right now. But mine was being contacted by the Teach America recruiter my sophomore year of college. I had gone into college being pre-pharmacy, then I took one chemistry course and that was gone. So throughout life, I'd always volunteered. My mom used to take me to volunteering when I was little. Then, in high school, I would sign up for things myself. I was always volunteering with kids and then even my peers, things like that. But the Teach America recruiter contacted me and we talked through like what the Teach America mission was and so on and so forth. And then he said, let's talk through some of the experience that you have. And I was like, well, I've never worked. I've just been swimming this whole time as my full-time job, but I've volunteered. And I realized in that conversation and after that, all these things I was just doing for fun, like working with teenagers, volunteering with kids, like being in the community, was actually my passion. I just thought it was just like a fun things that I just found fun. And I was like, oh, that's like actually my passion. I can actually do a career in this. And that was like a really defining moment for me. Because then when I sat down to create the resume for like the Teach America application, and I put down just all the things I did for fun, I had like 2.5 pages of things of a resume of volunteering that I'd done that was really meaningful. So I think for me, it was a moment of realizing that even though I may not always see the path of life, if I continue following my passions, following things I desire to do, they're like laying bricks down this path and I'll eventually get to the next stop, wherever that is. So like, with that Teach for America meeting, eventually doing Teach for America, I don't think that necessarily being a teacher is what I was supposed to do for the rest of my life, but working in the community with kids in some capacity, like that was really crucial. And I continue to do that to this day. So yeah, that was my moment.
Yes. Recruiting for Teach for America.
Oh, no!
Maybe. Maybe, wink, wink.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot of different types of memories. And I think some of them, like we've talked about, are in your body, some of them are in your mind. But do each of you have any sort of process for capturing memories or stories? And that would be to either like make sure that they're accurate memories or just to capture kind of like the emotion of it.
I don't know if I have a process. I'll be perfectly transparent. I don't think I have a process. I think what does help for me in being someone who people say have a pretty good memory is that most of my memories are tied to actions and events. So like I remember a particular event and then that's what triggers the rest of the memory, right? So yeah, like just thinking about stuff when I'm younger, like remembering picking, like shucking, like take the one thing, like remembering taking my grandfather to church. Like because it's something that I did on a, like, that's the event. And then just like remembering him being in the car and sometimes going to church with him, and his church being like this small congregation, really different from mine. And remember sitting in the congregation and being like, okay, this is kind of simple. But also that time, like bonding with him and, hearing him talk. And that's when he would tell me stories about pre-civil rights Alabama and about how he quit. Yeah, about how he quit his job when the white man tried to call him boy. Mind you, this is like, and then, the white man, like, and this is like, when I say this is like 1950s, 1940s Alabama. And my grandfather was like overseer for this, like, for like essentially like the plantation. It wasn't called a plantation then, but they had sharecropped some land before they had their own. And I remember him telling the story of how the son came home after, it was a veteran, I think, of World War II, and he came home to take over the land, like to be like his father. His father had passed, his mother was still alive, but it went to the son. And while he was at war, my grandfather was basically the head farmer, right? Like he oversaw the other people who were sharecropping, that kind of thing. But when he came back, so I think he came back, the white man came back from the war and was planning to take over. And in some conversation, the mother had pretty much deferred to my grandfather's judgment, right? And so I think in this man, in his asserting his authority, said something crazy sideways to my grandfather. And my grandfather was like, well, that's what we're not about to do. Ooh. Is be sideways, and quit the job. Like that's a dangerous thing for a Black man to do back in those times. But I will also say this, and I think this is why I have a different kind of view about that, is because that kind of instilled in me is that you don't always have to be a quote unquote victim of racism in that sense. Like Black people have agency, and Black people have always had agency, and Black people have used that agency. We just don't hear those stories, right? Like, and I'm not saying that it was easy. I'm not saying that, there weren't consequences for it. I'm not saying that he was not afraid. And I'm also not saying like he was not the only one. But the point is that like, that's how, by him telling me that story, I'm able to, grab the lessons from that story, which is, we weren't always victims. Like we weren't all, like we always fought against our oppression. Like, right? Like Dr. King didn't just come along and raise us all up. Like we've always been fighting continuously, whether it's those small micro actions or big actions. Like Black people have continuously been fighting. And so I think that those kind of memories inform a lot of who I am. And I said all that to say, like, that is, that's kind of how I organize my memories, right? Like, like I said, riding home with him in the car, I can remember him telling me those stories, right? Because I remember taking him to church. And so that's kind of the way I kind of form my memories. Social media helps, obviously, just the way that we document everything now. But for me, it's those small actions and those small things that you do that kind of tie to a larger memory, that kind of, that tie to those, again, because I think we all enjoy telling those stories, that tie to those stories that really bring home stuff.
For sure. What about you, Natasha? I know you're a storyteller, but then you also have Lyme to deal with. So how does it work for you?
Yeah, so I take a lot of pictures. It's always been true for me. I have like 7 or 8 external drives full of pictures. I've printed pictures and albums. I take so many pictures. That's a really big part of it for me. I do scrapbooking. So one thing about me is I used to be like a wedding hopper. I've been to, I think, over 40 weddings in my short life. And so I have 3 wedding scrapbooks. It's been expanding, but I keep like a program or the invitation or the save the date, like, and I print a picture and I put it in the album. So I remember so I keep, and then also outside of weddings, I have a scrapbook just for adventures. If I go to a play, I keep the playbill, or if I go to a certain movie, I keep the ticket stub and I put them in a book. It's nothing fancy. I just literally tape it in like a artist sketchbook. But then there's times that I'll sit down and I'll be like, what did I even do this year? And I just flip through the scrapbook and I'm like, oh yeah, So I have a Polaroid too that I take pictures on the Polaroid and I'll stick it in the scrapbook next to whatever it is that I've done. And then the last thing is that like I tell the same story like 7 or 8 times to my family, so everyone knows exactly what's going on. So there's been times in the past where like 2 different people from my family will meet up for the first time and they've all heard the exact story. Sometimes it doesn't work in my favor because they come from me and they start, you know, calling me out on things at the same time, and I'm like, this is not why I made y'all meet. But like, as I was saying before about the collective memory, like there's certain people in my core center and I tell them something happens, everybody gets the story. Like, so when I forget, somebody will remind me. So that's how I, and if it's something I need to like recall a story, I'll actually write down what happens. There's been something very specific. So I'll say, for example, like a conversation that I have that was really, really important. I'll either take screenshots. Now we have these fancy phones, but if it's an in-person conversation, I'll literally sit at my computer and type a script of what happened and save it somewhere so I can remember, because my brain is not to be trusted.
Well, I don't have Lyme, but I feel like similarly, I just forget stuff. And so this idea of the scrapbooking thing, I love it because, you know, I am the type of person who always wants to keep a playbill too. But I think at some point, as I started moving around more, I was like, why do you have this stack of playbills? But I think if I did something with it, it would feel more meaningful. So I'm like, maybe that's a lesson for me to take. But I'm like you. I write stuff down less so recently. I think I've been journaling since I was little, like when it would just be like a regular little blind notebook thing, the kind you get from like CVS, to all manner of little cutesy little journals and things. I've never liked small paper though. So the little ones with the lock and the little tiny key always used to get on my nerves. But yes,
Alison with the tiny notebook. I'm picturing a baby Alison being frustrated about the structure of a notebook, and it's so on brand.
It is. I was like, I can't stand. People would always be like, "Oh, I got you a notebook." I was like, "Is this 5.5 by 8.5?" I was like, "Yeah, no." I like 8 by 10 paper is the smallest paper I like to write on. Thank you so much. So like none of my journals were cute. Like I distinctly remember I had just a yellow one, you know, like the little cheapy ones you get with the silver coil. That thing rode with me for years. And I used to keep them between my mattress and the box spring. Very clever, super clever place to put it. And then I, you know, as a grown up, I've gotten like sexier ones, but anyway, so I'm a journaler. I write down big stuff. And then what I found recently is that usually when I go to journal, I get caught up reading and I go down memory lane, then I get tired and then I don't write it down. So maybe I'll like the last couple, I don't know, some years of entries have just been bullets because I like start reading and then I'm like, I got to write this down. So I'm like, all right, you're not getting prose. And I address the journal as a person. Like I speak to it as though it is, I'm like, you're not getting prose today. You're getting bullets. Maybe next time you can get a whole story. And then I just write down bullets. This is odd. And then like Stan, social media is a good reference point. And then again, I don't think I have anything original to say here, but telling stories. And I feel like there are like, one thing I love is like stories that exist inside of a family that get told over and over again. It's one of my favorite things. And like, you know, we have some like, Stan and I used to be part of a group when we first were living in Atlanta where we would do game nights every month. And so we have all these stories from game nights that we would just every game night, like repeat some of the same stories. And now, like, if you're on YouTube, you can see Stan is like giggling because I know you're thinking of like several of these things.
Like catchphrases already.
Yes. So many little moments, which we cannot repeat because most of them are like offensive or about something. But,
what happens at game night stays at game night.
That's
exactly
right.
Exactly.
That's exactly right. But like one of my favorite stories is when my cat almost got taken back from me. It's one of the funniest things that's ever happened to me in my life. And we tell that story a lot in mixed settings. And then pictures too, for sure. My wedding, I opted to not get a videographer, which is a decision that I try not to have a bunch of regrets, but that's closing in on regret. But I'm like, the details of that event may slide away from me, but we have like 700 pictures in the album. And literally, like, whenever I want to remember our wedding, I just look at them in order. And it really feels like a video of the whole day. And it was such a lovely day that it just like, I fill in all the moments in between. I also have like a highlight on my Instagram of the stories that I posted that day. And so I like will go back and just watch those. And so similarly, photos are super important. So,
and those pictures from your wedding were beautiful. That photographer, the subjects of the pictures. I mean,
we were just
did we not get introduced at your wedding? I'm sorry. I'm just
who?
How did we not? Me and Natasha.
No.
Because there was no formal structure to do that. And we hadn't started the podcast then, so she didn't really know
who I was. Yeah.
Yeah.
But we were there together. So we're going to include that as part of our origin story.
We were both there.
We didn't know it yet, but we were both there together.
Natasha, do you remember Stan did part of a reading?
I remember there were people reading.
Yes.
Do I remember
one of the guys?
It was Stan. I do not.
He was one of the guys.
I can't say I was the black one because Eric read too. So I was going to try to help you out, but clearly that was a fail.
Okay, last question. How have your memories changed based on context? Which is another great question, Stan. Well done.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks. So for me, and it's kind of going back to Natasha's conversations a little bit about schooling. Like I now can see I can now fully state with my whole chest that my 5th grade teacher was probably racist.
Oh,
yeah, no.
Probably take it out.
Well, she was racist. And the reason I can remember this is because I just remember her like, I was that kid. I loved school and school loved me. Like teachers loved me. Like they're like, oh, I can say it now. I was a nerd. I liked school. My parents never had to be like, oh, you got to do your homework. Like none of that I didn't struggle with any of that. But what I can always remember is how you have those intuitive feelings of like who likes you and who doesn't. And I can just remember her not liking me. Like I know that now, her not liking me. And one of the things that I now can put my finger on is because I think that she felt some kind of way that one of the highest achieving students in her classroom was the little black boy, right? Like I didn't fit into her stereotypes of who should be at the top of her class. And it wasn't anything, it wasn't any, she never, it wasn't to the extreme of your experience, Natasha, but it was definitely just little negative things, like little comments and the way she reacted, oh, you got 100 on the spelling test, just little snide comments, and just how you can feel when people are not genuine about your success. And that's one of the things I can definitely look back on those memories from elementary school, and because my whole other elementary school was great, teachers love me, but she definitely had, I think, this perception of black boys, which was weird because even though I like I said, I had never experienced that through my schooling until I got to 5th grade, and fortunately didn't feel it again in my educational career, which is rare, probably because again, I was in a lot of ways a good student, so didn't necessarily have to feel that, but I definitely remember it with her. And then the other thing I think about a lot is how my just context to a lot of your memories now, particularly for me around family structure and not realizing things that I took for granted, just family structure and community, basically the fact that I had, for the longest time, this is my funny story, this is my crazy story. For the longest time, I didn't realize that collard greens, that you could get them in a can. I thought that collard greens only came from the ground and that everybody's grandmother took them out the freezer because they had grown them themselves. I didn't know, when I went, the first time I saw a canned collard green was when I was at college, and I saw them, you could see through to the kitchen, and I saw her pour the can of greens into the serving tray. She was getting ready to cook them, And I was appalled. I was like, what is this? Like literally. And like I'm old. So we didn't have, I'm old. We didn't have phones in our dorm room. So you had to use the payphone. I think I went like after I left the cab, I called my mother and was like, do you know that collard greens can come in a can? And she was like, yes, Dad. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, how do you know this? Like, I thought everybody's grandmother grew their own vegetables and, and froze them. And that's how you got vegetables. Like, I didn't realize, like, and I shouldn't say vegetables, collard greens particularly, and like stuff like that. Like, I also didn't realize, like, for the longest time, I thought everybody made their own jelly and stuff because that's what my grandmother did. Like, I might have been like 7 or 8 when I figured that one out. But I thought everybody ate the jelly that their grandmother gave them, like, because that's what we did. Like, we got greens from Granny. We didn't get vegetables from like we got broccoli from the store, but like tomatoes and stuff, we didn't get tomatoes from the grocery store. We got tomatoes from Granny, from picking it. And so, like, just did not know that like, but the collard, when I tell y'all 100% the collard green thing, I did not know.
So that whole glory line of foods blew your whole mind.
It blew my whole mind. I didn't know it. I did not know it. And still am very leery of it, quite frankly.
Just offended by the whole concept.
Offended by the whole concept of canned greens. Like, yeah, like that. So like, like those that kind of stuff, it changes over time. Like now, of course, like it's silly, but that was my context. That was the way I grew up. Like, I remember one of my college friends telling me, he asked me how you meeting people the first time, he asked me like, who do I live with? I was like, I live with my mom and dad. And apparently the way I said it, he was like, you say that like everybody does that. And looking back on that now, I can see how arrogant that sounded and what a position of privilege I was speaking from, right? And and so like just remembering those things and kind of cringing because I'm like, ooh, yeah, that did kind of snobby,
Yeah.
And just so I mean, I think it's more your memories, you give them a different context once you grow and can add more layers to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say for me, similarly, like you learn, like we talked about, sort of like big principles that you pull down from events or memories, and then you can apply them sort of retroactively. So like for me, one of the big ideas that I came away from my father's passing with is that what happens is what's supposed to happen, which is an idea that helps me to ground things. So when I look back, right, like I think about painful times in my life, like, something like a breakup, for example, right, where you're like, and like I've said before that I was single for a long time. So the times, that big chunk of time that I was single, you look back at these breakups and you're like, like, what could I have done? Like, what could he have done? Why didn't it work out? Why, whatever, dramatic. Why wasn't love enough or whatever, right? And the idea that like what happens is what's supposed to happen is like, you're not supposed to be with that person. Like that is not your person. And when you're, I'll say for myself, when I was still single, that was like small comfort. I was like, I'm still single. That does not comfort me that that's not my person. Like, who is my person?
Where is he?
And where is he? Like,
where is he?
He lives in Miami. And I was in Atlanta, and that was part of the problem. And so even like the job that I took that got me here, and even the ways I felt about that job, right? Like, and I think about, like, I was describing this, I think, to my therapist, where it's like, I got here, didn't love it, was doing the job that I wanted to do, which was very hard, right? Which is when I pulled Natasha in. She saved me in many ways during that time, but then met a group of friends who were like a bridge across that time, because there's a world where I would have gone back to Atlanta. Like I only told myself I was going to be here for 2 years, and 2 years, like I met Lance right about at 2 years. And had I not met that group of friends to kind of bridge me to that, because in that 6 months before 2 years, I could have been planning my exit and been like, I don't like it here. I'm going back to where I was happy. And met this group of friends. I was like, oh no, I do like it here. It's okay. Met Lance and then was open to staying here. And so all of that happened exactly like it was supposed to, even though, you know, I might have a feeling about the group of friends. I might have a feeling about the job. Like, it's like, there's a lesson in all that. And it lined up to be exactly how it was supposed to. And so that's something that helps me to put all of the things that happened to me in this like purpose bound structure. And it helps me to see them, even negative things, with a little bit more of a positive light. Right. So I'm not going to say that like tragic things are like positive, but I'm able to see like, or even say that like something happening is like designed to teach me something. Cause I don't think I like that concept either, but just like, that is what happened. It was supposed to happen. And this is what I'm taking from it. That helps me a lot as I look back and add that context to things.
That is deep. Sorry to clear my throat after laughing so hard at Stan's story. Sorry, I did not realize. That is deep. And I'm gonna take that little nugget with me moving forward. Thank you. For me, I've been learning more about myself in terms of recently in therapy, actually, brought up attachment styles and how that affects how I like view relationships with people and, context around things. So learning more about that, and even just in general even before that conversation, learning more about how fear causes me to perceive situations in different ways that are not necessarily fully accurate or may not be the whole truth of the context of the situation. That has changed how I view my memories. So not to say that all of the memories are like completely wrong and like there's some alternate universe that I'm existing in that is not reality, but there are times I've had conversation with people where I'm like, this situation happened between us and this is what it meant to me. And they're like, that's not at all what I was thinking. I was just showering when you called. It wasn't because I didn't want to talk to you ever again. And I'm like, oh, you were showering? Why not take your phone into the shower with you so you could have answered my call? Like, that would have solved all of our problems. But moving forward, I don't know that with past situations, I feel I trust my memory enough to be like, let me fully reanalyze that. Plus, I think in some circumstances, my analysis was correct. So some people need to stay where they at in terms of relation to me. But moving forward, I'm learning to ask more questions before I solidify something. And I was like, this is a memory. I'm holding on to this forever. Like, no, ask a few more questions, get some clarity, and then you can lock it in and say, that's a memory. I can hold on to it.
Yeah. Which I think is like a general life truth that's important, and existing with curiosity is always helpful.
Yes. Ooh, I like that. Existing with curiosity. Ask a question. Even in shit seems blatant. Be like, is that what you meant?
Did what just happen? And then they're like, yeah. You're like, cool.
Okay. Yeah. Because sometimes what happens doesn't happen. You could just be thinking it. But you got to ask that question.
Yeah. All right. This conversation, as beautiful as it is mad long. I had to reapply my chapstick while we've been talking. Stan, what's up for you?
What's up for me is sports. Believe it or not, it is that time. Is it
sports time
already? It's sports time. It's sports ball with sports. Sportsing. No, so really like what's been up for me is the US Open, because I love tennis. I love watching tennis. I tried to play it once. Didn't go so well. So I just like watching it. And of course, I am an Alabama football fan, so it's that time of year as well. So, but this was between the US Open and Alabama football, that's what I've been doing this weekend and all this week. So that's what's up for me.
Well, I was mildly prepared because Lance was on his fantasy football draft the other morning.
Yeah.
I was busy talking. He's looking at his phone. And I'm like, what is, because I recognize the app, right? Because I know what it looks like now. And I was like, is it time already? And I was like, they should give a countdown to sports spouses. Just give me like a 6-week countdown where they're like, all right, it's coming. So then I can know that I can't watch things on the big TV on Sunday afternoons.
Here's my tip, Allison. Once Starbucks announces that their fall flavors are back, it's time.
Ooh.
That is an excellent tip.
And now I'm wondering if that's what they do.
I don't think so.
But I mean, it makes a lot of sense, right? Like, because fall is football, fall is.
Oh, touche.
There you go, Natasha. Marketing genius.
So once your app's like, order the new whatever that's out, you're like, it's time. My TV's going to be occupied. It's time.
It's not a bad idea.
I'm not ready.
It's fine. But you know things about football now that you didn't know.
I do. And I have a Seahawks shirt now.
Jersey?
Or no, t-shirt.
Okay.
Girls cut. It's girls cut in case we were supposed to go to a party where it was like a football theme.
Okay.
And I forget why I didn't wear it, but like Lance ordered it for me. Like he was like, I know you like the Seahawks. I was like, I like their color palette largely.
Okay.
And I like that they win a lot. That it helps me to be invested in a team that wins a lot. And what's his name? Derrick Henry. Is that him with the stiff arm?
Yeah, but
is it Derrick Henry, babe?
Derrick Henry doesn't play for the
Derrick Henry.
He plays for the Titans, not the Seahawks. No,
Derrick Henry. Who does Derrick Henry play for?
The Titans.
Oh no, you're right. Who's the good guy on the Seahawks? Not Russell, the other guy.
Marshawn Lynch.
DK Metcalf.
Oh, DK
That's
Metcalf.
The one that I really like.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Welcome, Lance, to the family meeting.
Sports correspondent.
That's right. Natasha, what's up for you?
For me, what's up for me is there's this person who reviews restaurants. I see her on Twitter. I know she's on YouTube too. It is like when I tell you, okay, you'll believe me because if you watch the YouTube, you'll see that I wipe tears easily. When I tell you I wipe tears in these little YouTube videos, oh my gosh, she just goes. It's her name on Twitter is K Hood. And she goes around to these restaurants. I think she's based in Atlanta, and she'll review these restaurants and she'll have me weeping. So if you just need like 4 minutes and a break to just laugh at something, go to K Hood on Twitter. She's at Roll It Up K, and I think she's like a YouTube page as well. But oh my gosh, y'all, I can't tell you. She starts every video with like her clothes, and she does something like, what is it? It's like fit check, make you and your bitch sweat.
I think I've seen this girl, and I know exactly who you're talking about, and it is hilarious.
It's so funny, and just as soon as I hear that, I feel like this joy starts in me. Like once I hear that, like how like they show those videos of babies and they hear Coco Melon intro theme, and they come running. I hear fit check, make you and a bitch sweat. I come running like, yay, it's time. So that check out K Hood. What's up for you, Allison?
I don't have anything quite that good. I have been just working really hard the last month. And so Lance and I just took a little weekend off. Like we just got back right before we recorded this. And so the only thing that's really up for me is like reflecting on that. I mean, obviously we're back recording. I got to edit and all that stuff. So work is back, but we went to this really, really cool Airbnb south of the city, like 45, 50 minutes away. And it is a tiny house inside. And this is how we really like each other. Because whenever we go to Airbnbs, they're always like less square footage than we have in our apartment. That's evidence. But it's a tiny house on this property that is like a 2.5 acre Zen garden that has like these beautiful like little places to sit with like cushions and curtains, and then running water all around because there's koi ponds just kind of like spotted all throughout the property. And so we just had a really chill weekend in town because I also didn't want to have to drive anywhere. And it was just lovely yesterday. It rained yesterday, so we didn't get to be outside for too long, but we just laid out in this beautiful garden and read books. And we played some cards and we watched Toy Story 4. while it was raining. And it was just a delight. So I'm trying to build more balance practices into my life, get more time away from my computer, spend a little time outside every day. And that this was a big part of that. So that's what's up for me this week.
Love that.
Yeah, it sounds great.
Yeah. All right. So Natasha, having you was a delight.
Delightful.
And I'm so happy you two got to meet. Kind of.
I'm going to recommend that you watch this on YouTube, probably, because I feel like our facial expressions and the copious amounts of laughter might come off a little bit better than they do on audio.
That's right. So yes, it has been an absolute delight having you on. My friend T. She's great. And like Stan said, you guys definitely watch it. So how can people work with you or get in touch with you?
You can email me at natashadmoody@gmail.com. I don't use social media really, and my Twitter is just for lurking and laughing. So I cannot share that with you. But you can email me and I will respond.
All right. Well, thank you so much again, and we'll talk to you later.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful.
Bye.
Bye.
Support for this podcast comes from Lilacs on York Creative Studios.
The Family Meeting is produced by me and Allison.
Our theme song is by Will Salua, and it is entitled 135th and Coffee.
You can find the show notes on what we discussed, including links posted in the blog section on lilacsonyork.com.
And you can keep up with the show on Instagram at Lilacs on York and on Twitter at The Family Meeting. You can also now watch us have these conversations on the Lilacs on York channel on YouTube. You can find me on social at Alison K. Mason on IG and Twitter, even though I do not tweet.
You can find me on social at Twice11 on IG and Twitter, even though I do not post on IG. Thanks for listening.
Meet you here next week.